Oh,
Hi.
sorry.
Hey, ma'am. What's up, girl? I'm Carter, a homicide detective.
Hi, okay.
I just want to run a few things past you and talk to you for a few minutes. I know these guys has already talked to you.
This is 19-year-old Valentina Delgado. Less than 12 hours ago, she and two accomplices lured three young men into the New Mexico desert, bound their hands with zip ties, forced them to their knees, and executed them one by one. The woman standing outside the truck. That's her mother. She drove out here because her daughter called and asked for a ride. She has no idea what Valentina has done. Not yet.
Ma'am, your daughter is a major suspect in a murder investigation.
A murder? No, there has to be a mistake, not her.
To the best of your knowledge, were they dead at that point or were they alive?
They were making noises, but I couldn't really say.
But she's about to find out. Three young men. Ezekiel Tafoya, 20 years old. Landon Pruitt, just 18. Mateo Baca, 19. Vanished after leaving a house party in Bernalillo on the night of May 23, 2023. 4 days later, a rancher's dog unearthed their bodies from a shallow ravine west of the Rio Puerco. Each victim had been bound, beaten, and shot multiple times at close range. The police didn't know who was behind it until a routine traffic stop, a stolen gun, and a terrified accomplice cracked the case wide open. And what detectives uncovered wasn't a crime of passion or a deal gone wrong. It was a calculated, premeditated massacre, orchestrated from start to finish by the young woman you're looking at right now.
Oh,
Hi.
sorry.
Hey, ma'am. What's up, girl? I'm Carter, a homicide detective.
Hi, okay.
I just want to run a few things past you and talk to you for a few minutes. I know these guys has already talked to you.
This is the story of how a 19-year-old girl planned and carried out a triple execution, and the moment her mother discovered what her daughter really is. What comes next is a case that will test everything you think you know about who is capable of evil, because sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one no one suspected. By the morning of May 24, 2023, three families in Bernalillo, New Mexico, were making the same phone calls. To hospitals, to friends, to anyone who might have seen their sons. Ezekiel Tafoya was 20 years old. He was enrolled at Central New Mexico Community College, 3 semesters in, and saving every dollar from his overnight stocking shifts at a grocery warehouse so he could apply to a welding trade program in the fall. His mother called him Zeke. She'd already texted him 6 times by 8 a.m., every message delivered. None of them read. Landon Pruitt had just turned 18, graduated from Rio Rancho High School 3 weeks earlier. He didn't walk the stage because he owed a library fine, so his grandmother threw him a barbecue instead and told him that was better than any diploma ceremony. He was supposed to mow her lawn that morning. He never showed. And then there was Mateo Baca, 19, the connector. The one who always knew somebody, always had a plan, always had his phone buzzing with messages. If you needed something, a hookup, a favor, an introduction, Mateo was the call you made. And his father described him as the kind of kid who could talk his way into any room and make everyone in it feel like they belonged. None of them were saints. They'd been dabbling in low-level drug sales to supplement minimum wage paychecks. Small amounts, local buyers, the kind of hustle that 1,000 young men across Albuquerque were running just to keep gas in their tanks. But they were loved. They had people waiting for them. And they had futures that, as of last night, no longer existed. And the last anyone saw of them, all three were leaving a house party near Highway 550 sometime around 11 p.m. They'd come in Ezekiel's car, a used silver Honda Civic with a dented rear bumper, and when their families drove to the address the next afternoon, the car was still there, parked on the gravel shoulder, doors locked, their jackets still inside. Their phones were off, not ringing, not going to voicemail, just dead. All three at the same time. Ezekiel's mother filed the first missing persons report at 4:17 p.m. Landon's grandmother filed the second an hour later. By nightfall, Mateo's father had called every contact in his son's phone. No one had heard anything. No one had seen anything. And somewhere out in the desert, beneath a pile of dry brush in a ravine no one had any reason to visit, 3 young men were already gone. 4 days. And that's how long those families lived in the space between hope and knowing, checking their phones every few minutes, driving the same streets over and over, taping flyers to gas station windows with photos their sons would have hated. Ezekiel's mother organized a volunteer search party that fanned out across the mesa trails west of Bernalillo. Landon's grandmother called the local news station twice. San Mateo's father walked into the sheriff's office every single morning and asked the same question. Anything? Every morning, the answer was the same. Then, on May 28th, a cattle rancher named Harlan Whitfield changed everything, and he wasn't even looking. Harlan was 63 years old, a third-generation rancher who ran a modest operation on leased land west of the Rio Puerco. That morning, he was doing what he'd done 1,000 times before, checking fence lines on his four-wheeler, and his blue heeler, Duke, trotting alongside him in the scrub. It was the dog that found them. Duke veered off the trail and started digging at a pile of brush in a shallow ravine about 40 yards from the fence line. Not sniffing, digging, frantic, obsessive, the way a dog digs when it's found something it can't leave alone. Harlan called him off twice. Duke wouldn't stop, so Harlan climbed down, grabbed the dog by the collar, pulled him back, and saw a hand, a human hand, fingers curled. That zip tie still cinched tight around the wrist. He didn't touch anything. He walked back to his four-wheeler, hands shaking, and called 911 from a cell phone that barely had 1 bar of signal. Within 2 hours, the ravine was swarming with Sandoval County deputies, state police, and forensic investigators in white suits, picking their way through the desert brush with numbered markers and evidence bags. What they uncovered over the next several hours would stay with even the most seasoned detectives for the rest of their careers. 3 bodies, all male, all bound at the wrists with zip ties. Each one had been shot multiple times at close range, the kind of wounds that leave no ambiguity about intent. The medical examiner would later determine that 2 of the victims were killed by the same firearm. The third was shot with a different weapon entirely. This was not a fight that spiraled out of control. This was not a drug deal gone sideways in a moment of panic. This was planned. This was organized. This was execution, carried out by more than one shooter, in a location chosen specifically because no one would hear it happen. And somewhere, right now, the people who did this were still free. Sometimes the biggest cases don't break because of brilliant detective work or a dramatic confession, though sometimes they break because someone forgot to renew their registration. May 29th, 2023, 6 days after the murders. A state trooper running routine patrol along Southern Boulevard outside Rio Rancho clocks a silver Nissan Altima with expired tags. Standard stop, the kind of thing that happens 100 times a day across New Mexico and usually ends with a citation and a handshake. But when the trooper approaches the driver's side window, 2 things register immediately. First, in the driver, a 21-year-old woman named Brielle Navarro is visibly intoxicated. It's 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, and her eyes are glassy, her speech loose, her movements a half-beat too slow. Second, there are dark stains on the passenger seat. Not coffee, not soda. The kind of stain that doesn't wash out because it was never meant to be there. As the trooper calls for backup, he spots something else. A bulge beneath a crumpled jacket on the floorboard. Underneath it, a stolen .40 caliber handgun. Brielle Navarro is arrested on the spot. During processing, detectives run the Altima's plates and pull the vehicle's recent cell tower history. And that's when the case splits wide open, because the data places that car in the exact same area as the burial site on the night of May 23rd. They bring Brielle into an interrogation room. She lasts less than an hour. It doesn't come out clean. It comes out in fragments, broken sentences, long pauses, her hands trembling so violently she can barely hold the cup of water they give her. She tells them she stayed in the car. She tells them she heard the gunshots but didn't see them. She tells them she watched two figures dragging something heavy into the dark and knew exactly what it was but couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't do anything but sit there with her hands over her ears. And then she gives them two names. The first is Dominic Harwell, 26 years old, the second shooter. The second name is the one that changes everything. Valentina Delgado, 19 years old, the one who planned it, the one who chose the victims, the one who picked the spot, the one who pulled the trigger, twice. Brielle says it through tears, her voice barely above a whisper. She planned everything. All of it. Every single part. What detectives pieced together from Brielle's statement wasn't the portrait of a crime that spiraled out of control. It was a blueprint, methodical, sequenced, and terrifyingly deliberate, designed by a 19-year-old who treated murder the way most people her age treat a group project. Valentina Delgado had been running a small drug distribution line for nearly a year. Nothing flashy, no cartel connections, no crew wearing matching colors. She operated through burner accounts on social media, coordinating drops through coded DMs, rotating her pickup spots every few weeks, and keeping her circle tight. She was careful. She was disciplined. She was profitable, not because she moved large volume, but because she never got sloppy. In a world full of young dealers who bragged too loud and spent too fast, Valentina did neither. She let her silence do the talking, and people respected her for it. The ones who didn't learned quickly that disrespect came with consequences. So when word reached her that Ezekiel, Landon, and Mateo had been telling people she'd shorted them on a deal, and worse, laughing about it openly at parties, Valentina didn't yell. She didn't threaten. She didn't post anything online. She went quiet. And that, Brielle told detectives, was when you knew it was serious. She called me and Dom over to her apartment, Brielle said in her statement. She was sitting at her kitchen table with a notepad. An actual notepad. She had the whole thing written out. The bait would be a fake bulk buy, a deal too good to turn down. I sent through a mutual contact so it wouldn't trace back to Valentina directly. The location was a stretch of desert she'd driven out to 3 days earlier and scouted on foot. The weapons, 2 handguns, one stolen from a relative's house, the other purchased through a straw buyer at a private sale in Las Cruces. And the disposal, the ravine, the brush to cover it, the route back to town that avoided every major intersection with cameras. She laid it out like a presentation. No emotion, no hesitation, just steps, logistics, and contingencies. Brielle told detectives she didn't think it was real. I thought she was venting. I thought she was trying to scare us into helping her rough them up or something. She talked like it was a business plan. Like she was presenting a project at school. She wasn't venting. She was scheduling. And in 48 hours, every line on that notepad would be crossed off. The night of May 23rd was warm, the kind of dry, still New Mexico evening where the air smells like dust and sage and the sky holds on to the last of the light like it doesn't want to let go. The house party near Highway 550 was winding down by the time Valentina pulled up around 10:30 p.m., Dominic in the passenger seat, Brielle in the back. Music was still thumping from inside, a handful of people lingering on the porch with red cups and cigarettes. Ezekiel, Landon, and Mateo were out front, talking, laughing, doing what young men do when the night feels like it belongs to them. Valentina stepped out of the car smiling. That was the thing about her. She could walk into any room, any circle, and make you feel like you were the only person worth talking to. She told them she had a connect out west who was sitting on weight and looking to move it fast. Good price, bulk deal. The kind of opportunity that doesn't come around twice. All they had to do was ride along. They didn't hesitate. Why would they? And they knew Valentina. They'd dealt with her before. She was plugged in, she was smart, and she'd never given them a reason not to trust her. They piled into the car, windows down. Someone connected their phone to the AUX. The bass rattled the rearview mirror. Valentina drove. Dominic rode shotgun. Brielle and the three boys crammed into the back, elbows bumping, everyone talking over each other. The mood was easy, loose, the kind of vibe that only exists when nobody knows what's coming. And the drive lasted 40 minutes. The city lights faded. The road narrowed. The music kept playing, but the conversation thinned out as the landscape turned to nothing but scrub and shadow. Mateo asked where they were headed. Valentina said, "Almost there," without turning around. Then the car stopped. A dark dirt road. No streetlights, no houses, nothing but empty desert in every direction. Dominic turned around in his seat. He was holding a gun. The laughter stopped like someone had cut the power. They were ordered out of the car, zip-tied, forced to their knees in the dirt. Valentina moved between them calmly, collecting phones, wallets, cash, everything, methodical, unhurried, like she was checking items off a list, because she was. Then she stood in front of them and spoke, not screaming, not raging, conversational, almost gentle. She told them exactly why they were here. She told them what they'd said about her. And she told them this is what happens. Landon started crying. Ezekiel tried to negotiate. Mateo begged, called her by name, said they could fix it, said whatever she wanted, just please. Valentina listened. She let them finish. And then she didn't waver. What happened next didn't take long. That's the part that stays with you. How little time it takes to end a life when the person holding the gun has already decided. Valentina raised the weapon and shot Mateo first. Close range. No warning. And the sound cracked across the open desert like something breaking that can never be put back together. He fell sideways into the dirt, and the echo hadn't even finished dying before she turned to Landon. He was shaking so hard his whole body was vibrating against the ground. He tried to say something, her name, maybe, or just the word please, but the second shot swallowed whatever it was. Then Valentina looked at Dominic and nodded. One word. Him. Dominic stepped forward and shot Ezekiel, and the oldest of the three. The one who'd been trying to negotiate just moments ago, his voice steady even as his hands were bound. He didn't make a sound, and then the desert was quiet again. The kind of quiet that only exists in places where nothing living wants to be. Back in the car, Brielle was hyperventilating. Her hands were clamped over her mouth, her breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps that fogged the window beside her. She hadn't moved from the back seat since the car stopped. Or she hadn't looked, but she'd heard everything. Valentina and Dominic dragged the three bodies to the ravine without speaking. It took several minutes. They covered them with brush, desert scrub, dry branches, whatever they could pull from the surrounding ground. It wasn't deep. It wasn't careful. It was enough. When Valentina climbed back into the driver's seat, she wiped her hands on her jeans, adjusted the mirror, and put the car in drive. "Let's go." That's all she said. The drive back took 40 minutes. Nobody spoke. The radio was still on, low, barely audible, the same playlist that had been playing on the way out. Somewhere around the 15-minute mark, Valentina reached over and turned the volume up. Not loud, just enough to fill the silence with something other than Brielle's breathing. She drove the speed limit. She used her turn signals. She stopped at a red light on Highway 550 and waited for it to change like every other car on the road. She drove home like she was leaving a late movie. The call came in at 9:47 a.m. Valentina's phone had pinged off a tower near a rural stretch of road outside Bernalillo, the same area she'd grown up driving through with her mother on the way to her grandmother's house. Officers from the Sandoval County Sheriff's Department were dispatched with Brielle's statement still warm in their hands and a name that 12 hours ago none of them had ever heard. Now it was the only name that mattered. When the patrol unit crested the low rise on the county road, they found exactly what the cell tower data promised. A pickup truck parked on the shoulder, engine still running, hazard lights off. just sitting there in the morning sun like it was waiting for someone, which in a way it was. Valentina was in the passenger seat, seatbelt on, hands in her lap. She'd called her mother 20 minutes earlier and told her she needed a ride. Didn't say why, didn't say from where. Just come get me. And Renata Delgado, because that's what mothers do, got in the truck and drove. The body camera captured everything. The officer approaches the passenger side. Valentina looks up at him with dark, steady eyes. Not startled, not nervous, not anything. Her arms are crossed over her black t-shirt. Her expression is the kind of blank that doesn't come from calm. It comes from somewhere past it. Through the open driver's side door, Renata stands in a white dress, the one hand on the frame of the truck, squinting against the sun. She looks like a woman who thinks this is a traffic stop, an inconvenience, something that'll take 5 minutes. Is there a problem, officer? The officer's hands gesture as he talks. He asks Valentina her full name, her date of birth, where she was last night. The questions are measured, deliberate, and each one lands a little heavier than the last. Valentina answers in a flat monotone. Name, age, address, like she's filling out a form. She doesn't flinch. She doesn't fidget. She sits perfectly still while her mother's world begins to end 3 feet behind her. Because Renata is listening, and Renata is watching, and the body camera catches every millisecond of what happens to a mother's face when the truth arrives uninvited. First, confusion. Her brow tightens. She steps closer to the open door. Why are they asking her daughter these questions? Then worry. Her hand drops from the truck frame. She wraps her arms around herself. The white dress shifts in the breeze. Something is wrong. Then fear. Her mouth opens slightly, but nothing comes out. Her eyes move from the officer to her daughter and back again, searching for an explanation that will make this make sense. One that will let her keep the version of her daughter she drove out here believing in. And then, recognition. It doesn't arrive all at once. It seeps in like water through a crack in a wall. Something behind Renata's eyes changes. Not breaks, collapses. Like a structure that's been holding weight for 19 years and just realized the foundation was never there. The officer asks Valentina to step out of the vehicle. Renata whispers it, barely audible on the body camera audio. 3 words that will be played in courtrooms, on news broadcasts, and in the minds of every parent who watches this footage for years to come. But what did you do? Valentina unbuckles her seatbelt, steps out onto the gravel, puts her hands behind her back without being asked, and she never once looks at her mother. Not once. The station footage is the quietest part of this story, and it's the part that breaks you. They're seated in a waiting area, not an interrogation room, not behind glass, just 2 cushioned chairs separated by a small round table with a phone on it. Now, the kind of room where you'd wait for a doctor's appointment or a delayed flight. Ordinary, institutional. The last place on earth a mother should have to learn what her daughter has done. Valentina sits in the chair closest to the wall. Black t-shirt, jeans, hands clasped between her knees, head tilted slightly downward, her dark hair falling along the side of her face like a curtain she's trying to hide behind. She doesn't look at anyone. She doesn't move. If you turned the sound off, but you'd think she was a college student waiting to speak with an academic advisor about a missed exam. 3 feet away, Renata sits with her arms crossed so tightly, it looks like she's holding herself together. Like if she lets go, something inside her will come apart and never reassemble. Her body is angled away from her daughter, not dramatically, not performatively, just enough, just the smallest rotation of the shoulders that says, I cannot face you. A pink handbag sits on her lap. I'm still zipped. She's still wearing the white dress she threw on when her daughter called and said, come get me. White sneakers. Hair pulled back. She looks like she left the house expecting to be gone 15 minutes. A uniformed officer stands to the left, clipboard in hand, pen moving steadily as he documents Valentina's preliminary statement. He asks questions in a low, even tone. Valentina answers without looking up. Short sentences, flat delivery. The facts of 3 murders delivered with less emotion than a grocery list. And Renata listens. She doesn't interrupt. She doesn't cry. She doesn't scream or lunge across the table or demand to know why. Her grief has already moved past all of that. Past the stage where tears still work. Past the stage where anger gives you something to hold on to. She has arrived at the place beyond all of it. The place where you sit very still because stillness is the only thing left you can control. And in the weeks that follow, Renata cooperates fully with investigators. She turns over records, answers every question, provides access to Valentina's apartment. But she makes one request through her attorney, and she makes it only once. Do not ask her to visit her daughter. Months later, in a written statement that prosecutors will read aloud at sentencing, Renata Delgado puts into words what that silence in the station could not. She is not the person I raised. 7 words. That's all. In 7 words, carrying 19 years of birthday candles and school drop-offs and goodnight kisses and the quiet, ferocious hope every mother carries that her child will turn out okay. 7 words that acknowledge the most devastating truth a parent can face, that love, no matter how deep, no matter how constant, was not enough. And if you go back and watch that station footage again, and millions of people will, you'll notice something you might have missed the first time. But Valentina's hands are clasped, her head is bowed. But at one point, just for a moment, her eyes drift to the right, toward her mother. Not her face, just the edge of her, the white of her dress, the crossed arms, the rigid posture of a woman turning to stone. Valentina looks, and then she looks away. It's the closest thing to remorse the camera ever captures, and it's not enough. It will never be enough. The trial lasted 3 weeks. It felt like 3 years. Valentina sat at the defense table in a white blouse her attorney had chosen for her, an attempt to soften the image that had already been seared into the public consciousness through the body camera footage. It didn't work, because clothes can change how a person looks, but they can't change how a person sits. And Valentina sat the same way she had in that pickup truck, the same way she had in the station, perfectly still, eyes forward, hands folded. And as if the courtroom and everyone in it existed on the other side of a window she couldn't be bothered to look through. The prosecution's case was a wall with no cracks. Brielle Navarro took the stand for 2 full days, walking the jury through every detail, the notepad, the scouted location, the weapons, the drive, the shots, the silence on the way home. Cell tower records confirmed the timeline. Forensic ballistics matched both firearms to the wounds. And then, on the 9th day, the body camera footage was played for the jury on a screen 6 feet wide. The courtroom went silent. Jurors watched a mother's face collapse in real time. One of them looked away. The rest couldn't. Valentina's defense team argued diminished capacity, an absent father, childhood neglect, undiagnosed personality disorders that had gone untreated for years. A psychologist testified that Valentina displayed traits consistent with severe antisocial behavior. But the jury watched the defendant throughout those 3 weeks, and what they saw was a young woman who never flinched, never cried, and never once turned to look at the families of the 3 men she had killed. She stared straight ahead as if the room had nothing to do with her. Then came the victim impact statements, and the courtroom broke. Ezekiel's mother approached the podium holding a single sheet of paper, his acceptance letter to a welding trade program. And he was supposed to start in the fall. She didn't read from it. She just held it up and let the silence do the work. Landon's younger sister, 15, barely able to see over the microphone, read a poem she'd written for his memorial. Her voice cracked on the second line, and she kept going anyway, because that is what the people left behind have to do. They keep going. And then Mateo's father stood. He was a quiet man who had sat through every day of the trial without speaking, but without reacting, his hands in his lap, his eyes on the floor. He walked to the podium. He adjusted the microphone, and he delivered a single sentence that no one in that courtroom will ever forget. "My son called me that night to say he'd be home by midnight. I'm still waiting." He sat down. The judge called a 15-minute recess. It wasn't enough. The verdict came on a Thursday. Guilty on all counts. 3 counts of first-degree murder, 3 counts of kidnapping, armed robbery, and tampering with evidence. Valentina was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. She was 20 years old. She will die in prison. When the judge read the sentence, she didn't blink. Dominic Harwell received 45 years under his plea agreement. Brielle Navarro received 22. Both will be middle-aged before they see the outside of a cell. Neither looked at Valentina as they were led away. But this story does not end with a verdict. It ends with something smaller, something most people in the courtroom didn't even notice until a reporter mentioned it the following morning. On the day of sentencing, in the gallery behind the prosecution table, there was an empty chair, 4th row, aisle seat. It had been reserved. A small placard on it read, "Family," but no one sat in it, because it belonged to Renata Delgado. And Renata did not come. She could not sit in the same room as the truth about her daughter. She could not watch the judge say the words. She could not be there when the last door closed on the child she had carried and raised and loved with everything she had, and still lost. Some truths are too heavy to carry into a courtroom. Some loves don't end with a scream or a slammed door or a final conversation. They end with a chair that stays empty, a phone that stops ringing, a mother who drives home alone in a white dress and never speaks her daughter's name again. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe and watch this next video. Goodbye.